You got mail.
Did not see that coming. This is your very last email from God as a 7th grader. This is from John 17:4. I've brought you glory on earth by completing the work you gave me to do. My dear, incredibly loved, oh so precious, soon-to-be 8th graders. It matters how you start a race, but the most important thing is how you finish it. At the start of a cross-country race, lots of people run ahead, full of energy, but 3 miles later, many of those early leaders are nowhere to be seen. They started strong, but they didn't finish strong. You, my precious ones, be the ones who finish strong. Pace yourself. Look at your life and see what it's going to take to finish the best you can. Be mindful of decisions that you make every day regarding what you do with your time, who you spend it with, how you use the gifts that God's given you. Whatever you do, don't just do it with the short term in mind. Live your whole life, every day, as if you are running a race for me, because you are. Then, at the end of your life, you will be able to join Jesus in saying, Father, I did what you told me to do. I finished strong. So, typically you would think of this as finishing the school year strong. But you know, as I was praying for y'all, it's about a lot more than a school year. Running the race is not just about finishing the school year strong and making sure you get everything done. In Hebrews 12, 1-2, and I'm going to read it from the Message, just because I think it might grab you a little bit more. Do you see what this means? All those pioneers who blazed the way, all those veterans cheering us on, it means we better get on with it. Strip down, start running, and never quit. No extra spiritual fat, no parasitic sins. Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race that we're in. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. That exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way. The cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God. You've been called into this race. All year we've been talking about how you are fearfully made and that you have been designed on purpose for a purpose. This journey that God began in you, this is your race. Don't dream of winning. Don't dream of doing it well. Don't talk about doing it well. Train for it. So, you know my girl Robin. If you remember, she's one of my favorite instructors in Peloton. She's the one who gave me the shout out for my 100th ride. Well, she's a marathon runner and an ultra marathon runner, like 50 to 100 mile races. And she didn't even start running until she was in her late 20s. So she wrote a book about how she became a runner and then gives training advice and how to do runs and how to prepare for ones. And I don't believe she's a Christian, but so much that comes out of her mouth is truth, God's truth. So God's called you to this race. You're not going to feel ready. I never feel ready. I never feel good enough. I feel like very seldom am I running strong. I know what a sinner I am. So how in the world can I run a race that God has me on every day in a way that is going to glorify Him? Because that's what I want to do. And I just think of the Nike slogan. You know what? Just do it. So this goes back to what I was talking about in the video about renewing your mind. I pulled out some of the few things in her book. And she started off by saying, I defined myself before I was a runner or before I was an athlete by the story I was telling myself. That's what it talked about in that video. What are the pathways that you are making stronger and stronger about the things that you're telling yourself, that you believe in yourself? So she started changing her story. She says you can push yourselves to where you ought to be, but it's going to take a little sweat. It's going to take work. Sometimes, I loved this, sometimes you just have to fake it till you make it. So lace up, puff your chest, and just go for it. It's the act of moving one foot in front of the other that makes you a runner, not the little voice in your head uttering, no, can't, won't. Flipping that story, though, can be tough. In this chapter, she spends the whole time about changing that voice inside that writes that story, that makes those strong pathways. That reminds me of the definition of faith. Faith is believing without seeing, calling those things as though they are, even though you haven't seen it yet. The same thing is true about you. Step out in faith. Just do it. You are a child of God. You are treasured. You are loved. And God has a perfect, perfect plan for you. And through Him, you can do absolutely everything that He calls you to do victoriously. So this is reminded me, of course, the story about one of my kids. When Lauren started running half marathons, and she did a whole lot of research before she did this first marathon, and there was a lot of preparation, months and months and months, that went into being able to run this first race and being able to do it successfully and well. And so I looked at, as we're talking about a race, I started researching what kind of preparation is there for marathon running and for races. And every single article that I read had some of the same common themes. They all said that you had to have a motivation. What's your motivation? What's your motivation for running this race God has you on, this journey, and running it well? Why do you even want to do it well? Is it because your parents want you to, because you think it's the right thing, because it makes you look good in front of other people? Because you know what? This is your race now. It's not your parents' race. It's not your friend's race. This is your race. Or is it because you want to live for Him and you want to live for His purposes and you want to please Him and glorify Him and serve Him? But in order to do that, it takes training. So if your motivation is to do this life in a way that is going to enable you to do all that God's called you to do, with all of the gifts, with everything that He's designed in you, to go out into the world, embrace it, change it, get out in there, and change it for Jesus. If you're going to do that, it's going to take some training. And if at this point you're thinking, I don't want to do that, pray about it. Because He can make you want to. He is your motivation. So training. Don't just wish for it, work for it. So we get back to the renewing your mind video. What are you filling your mind, your heart, your soul, your eyes with? Is it building you up? Is it strengthening you spiritually? Is it bringing you close to who you need to be to run this race well? It says to lay aside every weight. In these books, it said it's really important in a marathon to figure out how to carry any extra weight. Your water, your phone, snacks. Because any extra weight can keep you from running it the best that you can. It can kind of weigh you down. So what are the spiritual weights that are making it hard to run? Are you tied up in your popularity? Are you tied up in what people think? Are you tied up in social media? Are you addicted to those video games? Are you using your time in a way that you know it's not building you up, that you know it's not feeding your soul, that it's not strengthening your spirit? Is it friends that you've chosen? They all mentioned that you need to have proper equipment. You can't do this race unless you're equipped. You can't strengthen yourself. And you all know about how I use my Bible resources in my app. So this is one of my training tools for sure. Also, music. I'm telling you that I have music for when I'm weary. I have music for when I'm down. I have music for when I'm dry. I have music for when I'm praising. I have music that I'll choose even when I don't feel like praising that can get me to be praising by the end of the playlist. Music is a big deal for me. The other thing is community. She mentioned, and they mentioned this as you're training, she said that at first she started training by herself, and she said her running world exploded when she started running with the New York City Bridge Runners. It was just a group of runners, and that running with them unlocked parts of her potential that she didn't even know were there. They offered encouragement, motivation, advice, and ran shoulder to shoulder with her. She said it blew up her ability to run. You can't do this life, this race, by yourself. God's designed us to do this in community with other people because we're just not strong enough. Sometimes we just don't have it. But if we have community, others can lift us when we can't lift ourselves, when we're struggling, when we're growing weary. Not only that, but for us to be there for other people. Last year, all three of my kids were going through horrible, scary things. Andy had issues going on in his head. And they were testing him for really, really scary things. He's a weightlifter, and he had some very scary symptoms. And you know me, I started battling in prayer. And I would come in at lunch, and every day, on my way to school, I would be praying. I'd be listening to music, and God would give me a song or a playlist that I knew could lift them up, could get them through 5 minutes. Lauren, too. And then at lunch, I had my conversations with Jesus at lunch, and I would send that to them. And while I was being strong for my kids, I didn't let them see my fear. I was scared. And so I had my people that were praying for me, that were lifting me up, so that I was able to be strong and sincere, not just faking it. You have to do this in community. You know, Lauren, when we came to her first race, this was her first race, and we were on the sidelines, and you know, this was getting towards the end of her race, and you can just see the focus, and you can see pain. We couldn't do the struggle with her, but you know what? We were on the sidelines, and we were cheering, and we were encouraging. I was praying, maybe embarrassing a little bit, but ultimately rejoicing with her as she crossed that finish line, because we knew what she put into and sacrificed to be able to do this race well. And she did it really well. That's how we should be, determined to run this race in a way that makes God our Father so proud of us. That's what I want. But doing it with others, you're gonna have to listen very carefully here. Not only eases our burdens, but it makes it more fun. It makes it more joy-filled. I have friends where we can find laughter and a joy that comes even when there's great struggle. And you know, Lauren said something on my last bike ride, and she said, what you focus on magnifies. Think about that. What you keep thinking about, what you keep your eyes on, what you're so attentive to becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and things outside become smaller and smaller and smaller. So Lauren's friend Lizzie, that she has grown up with since they were 2, these girls have been through a lot together. They were roommates in college. They went to Westminster together. Lauren was in her wedding. And, you know, through all these years, they have always gone through life together with God. And they have always been able to laugh through what they have. So Lauren's second half marathon, Lizzie's living in Birmingham now, and she went to Birmingham and ran a race with Lizzie. And just listen to this.
Hey, Liz, 0.2 miles. Doing great, girl. Doing great.
Oh, that sound was terrible. But they were saying, Lauren's going, Liz, how you doing? 0.2 miles down. And Lizzie's like, feeling pretty good, feeling a little tired, but only 12.9 to go. And they're laughing the whole way. And you know, Lauren said that it was so much easier running with her friends because she was so focused on their conversation and their laughter and their stories, and it took her mind away from the pain and how many more miles were left. And she actually said as she ran it, they were laughing and being together. There was so much joy in that. And so as they finished the line, the crossing line, there was exuberance. We ran this. We ran it well. We ran it together. We were strong. And as I look at this picture, I just think this is a beautiful illustration of what we have waiting for us. I want to run this race that God has me on in a way that when I finish, I'm gonna be in front of my Father God, and I'm going to be so joyful, and I am determined to be standing in front of Him and to hear these words, not get a medal, not get a prize, not get applause, but to hear this. Well done, good and faithful servant. I'm so proud of you. You ran the race well. So my precious ones, run your race well. I love you.